so happy to be here on our last full day. So we have a little video to start off. Ready? All right, are you ready to go? Rev your engines, let's roll. So I wanted to talk to you today about the education mindset. We've been talking a lot about mindset, and I want to talk about the frame of education mindset in relation to entrepreneurship and startups, and how you can apply this mindset to startups. So I work in a sector where I'm busy involved in setting up education partnerships around the world. And so we're setting up these partnerships between US universities and other kinds of entities around the world. And so we have different kinds of systems that we use to put these different types of partnerships in place. So I want to talk a little bit about my personal experience and how I apply this to entrepreneurship in my life, and then how you might apply this system to your entrepreneurship. So I work with, oh, okay, sorry. There you go, go to that one. We have a problem here because we're scrolling and it doesn't scroll very well. So I have three different corporations that I work with. I have the Tertiary Education Development Corporation, which is the corporation that is involved with setting up these international partnerships. And then I have the Ed Reporter, which is an educational news site that provides information to consumers of education around the world who are looking for study abroad opportunities or study in their own country. Information about education in general. It's for consumers of education, so teachers, what's new and happening in the area of education. And then we have a nonprofit, which is the Back to School Fund. If you're not aware, the student loan debt crisis in the United States is a huge, huge issue. Right now, there's $1.5 trillion of student debt that is to be collected in the US. It's a huge percentage of the US GDP. It's probably the biggest point that's going to be in the upcoming elections in the US in 2020. It's a huge issue. So we're trying to perhaps provide a solution to this problem through the use of Bitcoin and blockchain. So what I would like to talk about in terms of the education mindset is basically two things. One is a systems approach to entrepreneurship, and the second thing is a talent stack. In my opinion, these are the two most important qualities in terms of being successful as an entrepreneur. So let's first talk about this systems approach. So there's a difference between systems and goals. So we're usually taught that setting goals is important, that setting goals is essential for getting forward in life, that we need to set goals and we need to attain those goals. But that usually doesn't work out very well. Can anybody tell me why? Why do you think goal setting is not perhaps a good idea? Okay. Uh-huh, perfect, yeah.
Okay.
What's that?
Yes, Ms. Bonetta right here, Mike.
Life takes a different direction.
Perfect. Yeah, life happens in the meantime. Very good. And we had another one up here.
Guys.
We set up very high expectations or high goals which are really not practical to reach out.
Okay. All right. Perfect. Yeah, and one more over here to the right.
I also think it's because we tend to shift our interests and passions quite often. So it's very difficult for you to set a certain long-term goal. Like you'd say you want to study, and today I say I want to study something, but in a year's time I might have grown so much that I've got to shift in perception, and I want to achieve something different, and then it might be difficult to go to the actual, like it will still be the same goal, but I mean the kind of path I take towards achieving that goal would be very different. So it's very difficult to then sort of like plan it out to the T for those kinds of reasons. For those reasons, I mean.
Okay, perfect. So you've got the ideas that goals are kind of static, right? They're usually long-term and we're planning for something in the future, but life happens in the meantime, right? And so we don't plan for these different options that come up. Maybe something new presents itself. Maybe things change in the environment. Maybe your goals or your passions or your desires change. And so we need to be a little bit more malleable. Goal is kind of like a linear perspective, and we want to take steps to get there. But a systems approach is more of a holistic approach where we're looking at our whole life and what's going on, and the system is adaptable. We can change it. And so we have a much better chance of success if we follow a systems approach instead of a goals approach. You can keep going. Go. All right, stop. So the systems approach will improve your odds of success, and it opens for new options. It doesn't necessarily lock you into those old targets. So there's not a sense of feeling bad that you didn't achieve your goal, because with the systems approach, you can kind of change and adapt your goal, your end target, and you modify it along the way as you go. And we talk a little bit, a few of the speakers have spoken about failure and how failure is actually really important because we learn from our failures. So they're not so problematic. I mean, at least you were out there trying. At least you were out there doing something. And we always learn something. So we incorporate that into our capabilities and our talent stack as we're modifying our systems or modifying our target that we're trying to hit. So like one perfect example of this is people want to lose weight. So they say, oh, I want to lose 10 pounds. This is my goal. I'm going to lose 10 pounds. But they don't have a proper system in place. So if you have a proper system in place, that would be learning about nutrition, planning your diet, planning your exercise routine. It's implementing all of these life habits that will help you to attain that goal. So it's much more than just focusing on what the one singular objective is. So how did we apply this to education? Go ahead, you can scroll up a little bit to the next. Yeah, so in the TED Corporation, what we do in our systems approach is that we don't have a one-size-fits-all model. Each and every scenario is different. Each and every client is different. Each and every location is different. So the needs and the culture and the desire of the students and the economy, and it changes as we move along. So we have to be very flexible. So we have 4 basic models that we work with in terms of international education. And so the first one is attestation. And attestation is where, like, we as a university in the US, we're kind of giving our stamp of approval to education in other locations. So for example, there's a corporation that I work with in Istanbul, and they're not a university. However, they have very, very, very wonderful programs, and they're in a very specific sector. They work in the oil and gas sector. which is not our main competence. I mean, as a university in the US, we don't work with the oil and gas sector. That's not our competence. But they have very high quality programs, yet they want this validation from the US. So we give them credibility by attesting to the validity of their curriculum. So we analyze it, we visit, we make sure that they have proper quality control, we look at their content, and then we also provide a certificate from the US, kind of like giving our ISO 9001 quality seal of approval to their program. So it lends credibility, and then they're able to charge a higher fee, and also it kind of opens the doors for students who receive that diploma to move up in their work, in their job. They can get a promotion. They can go on to the university by showing this additional document. So it's not a diploma. It's not like a bachelor's degree or a master's degree, but it's an additional validation of the work that they've done. And then we work with licensing, where we're licensing other institutions to use our content. So we develop the content in the US, and we go through the accreditation and all the quality controls and all of the process of creating content and curriculum, and then allowing others to use our content. And then we do joint venture and partnerships. This is better for people who have more capital to invest, so they really want to get involved in a partnership. So they've got the money to put up where they want to really become involved. And then, of course, it really depends on each and every situation. So all of these, like, it's not a cookie cutter approach. So everyone is negotiable, and we discuss it. So it depends on how much experience they have, how much capital they have, how much infrastructure they have, how much capacity they have, and how much time they're willing to invest in it, how much of the risk they want to take on. So we negotiate that back and forth in terms of our partner and joint venture. And then finally, we have the spin-off or satellite campus model, where we're creating everything, all of the content, yet somebody else is running it. So they're taking on our identity, our brand identity, our content, and they're running it there locally. So we're in the process of opening several different satellite campuses right now. You can skip through that. I already kind of talked about that. Okay, so the thing about a systems approach is that it's malleable, it's flexible. So not one of those four necessarily meets everybody's needs. It might be a combination of them, and there might be differentiation between the different types of models. So, and one can evolve into another. So we might start with a licensing and then eventually move to a franchise model. So we need to kind of like be open to that possibility that it's going to grow and evolve and change. And this is like the most important lesson to learn, is that initially our ideas are never what we really end up doing. We really go through a lot of negotiation and discussion in terms of what's going to work best in that situation. So we're constantly adapting, constantly evaluating and assessing, and tweaking as we move along. We're really a very data-driven institution, and so we collect a lot of data, and so we try and do like a 360 approach in terms of data collection. So we do student surveys, we do faculty surveys, we do staff surveys, we monitor grades, we see how students are doing in terms of attaining learning objectives. So we're measuring the students' trajectory along their educational path to see if, in fact, they are meeting the goals of our curriculum and they're able to attain those goals. So we're constantly changing and trying to improve, and then, of course, with new technologies coming in, we try to incorporate that and work with adaptive learning and adaptive testing, and including, now we're looking at adding AR and different technologies that we can incorporate into the education scenario. So let's talk about this then in terms of your entrepreneurship. What can you do? How can you apply all of this to your entrepreneurial ventures. So what are the kind of questions that you would ask yourself in terms of this system? How can you apply it to what you do in entrepreneurship? So first of all, if you were to go with the first model of attestation, that's like our blessing on your product or your service. So if you're working with another corporation that has a lot of experience, that has a lot of background, that has a very strong brand value, can you work with them so that they give their blessing to your product or service? This will give a real boost to your initial startup, right? So it doesn't look like a brand new small joint venture or a brand new small startup, but you've got the blessing of some well-established entity in your industry who's willing to kind of give you some support and credibility. So this can really help you to get started. When you look at the licensing model, are you interested in renting someone else's IP? Do you want to use their IP, or do you want to develop it in-house? You need to kind of consider your own resources. How much money do you have? How much capacity do you have? Do you have the internal capacity to develop your products, your services, your systems? If you don't, you might want to borrow it and pay for it, therefore you rent it from somebody else for a certain amount of time. There are obvious certain tax implications for these different kinds of structures too. So I don't know about in each and everybody's country what the situation is, but when you do a licensing agreement in the US, then you've got certain tax deductions that can be very beneficial on your bottom line. Then with the joint partner, the joint venture, it's really a more capital and labor intensive option. So do you have the capacity to get involved at that level? Do you have the infrastructure? Do you have the people in place who can cooperate with another entity and that you're able to work together to create something bigger? And then finally, and this is usually a little bit later in the entrepreneurial process, but can you spin off what you've created? Can you create your own satellite, right? Can you spin it off to somebody else? Can you sell your idea? Can you franchise your own idea? Can you get others to run it? So you can think of it as a consumer of these ideas with your own joint venture, and then eventually when it becomes to a point where it's successful enough, then you can think about being the person who does the blessing, who licenses the IP, who provides the knowledge and the oversight for the joint venture, et cetera. So thinking a little bit about this, how, like, one thing that kind of concerns me a little bit about the boot camp idea, for example, is now what? What are you going to do after you leave here? What's your next step? Where are you going to go from here? You've spent so much time and creative energy, and you've met new people, and you've started to collaborate and cooperate. And so you're creating a baby, right? And it's a brilliant idea, and it may or may not have potential. Maybe it'll work out great. Maybe it'll be one of those things that is not successful. Nevertheless, you're going to learn from it. So it's very important to kind of try and think about how you can incorporate this educational mindset into your own joint venture, and particularly this project, so that you can carry it forward. Because in events like this, the tendency is that we go back to our own lives, we go back to our own countries, we get involved with our own prior businesses or jobs or education if we're pursuing that formally, and people get busy on their own things, and then it's difficult to maintain communication. So it's really important to kind of think now about how you can keep systems in place with your group to give continuity to your project. So this is an example. I'm going to go up a little bit. It's okay. There's a kid named Eric Feynman. Are you familiar with him? Have you heard of him? So he's, go ahead. He started this one project named Botangle. He sold it when he was 16, and then he bought it back when he was 20. Go up, and he's a Bitcoin investor. So let's watch this video for just a sec.
Yeah, I mean, it was a funny story. So right after like the financial crisis happened in like 2008, 2009, my brother, who was a lot older than me, brought me to this protest, and I think we were like running from the police or something, and then someone had like a Bitcoin shirt on, and I was like, well, what is that? And he's like, oh, he's like a hippie. He's like, man, I think it's going to end Wall Street, all the corruption and all the bad things. So I actually went back and looked at it and thought, oh wow, this actually has a lot of great use cases. My brother and I, we both looked at it, and we go, this is really the next big thing, because I think the main use case of Bitcoin is that there's is bad politicians. And I think especially after the financial crisis happened, we kind of saw that. And 2, Venezuela, people are using Bitcoin just to buy food because their currency isn't working. 3, even refugees are starting to use it now, where they can take all their money rather than leaving it all behind. They put it on like a USB stick, put it in their pocket, take their money and go. So I kind of got the vibe of that back when I was really young. So that's why I really got into it.
So you got into it right before, I mean just before, right? It took off and had that massive run up to $20,000 a piece several years ago. Now it's come back down a lot though, and people are starting to question the long-term viability of it. So are you buying, holding, or selling your Bitcoin right now?
I'd say I'm holding right now, but yeah, I think there's 4 big problems that need to be fixed with Bitcoin that make Bitcoin long-term dead if they're not solved. I think they can be solved. The first being that the high transaction fees. 2, it takes too long to send anything. 3, the people that are trying to solve those problems are kind of cultish, full of infighting. And 4, and I think this is the very biggest problem, is that it's too hard to get into. It's really hard, no easy on-ramp.
Well, some of those problems you're actually addressing with the development of a new Bitcoin investing app that you're launching. Give us an idea of those problems that you're trying to solve, how you're trying to solve those, and how you think it'll simplify the process for people who aren't interested in a cryptocurrency. Absolutely.
So I'm focusing all my efforts on solving that main problem first, that it's too hard to get into. So today we're launching coinbitsapp.com, where it allows you just to sign up, connect your payment information, and buy Bitcoin. I know that sounds simple, but that's actually been really hard for people, just to have it where it just works. So it makes it super easy. You can invest in it just manually, or 2, you can have it so you can connect your debit card or credit card to it, where every time you swipe, it just invests a little bit of Bitcoin. So you can run it in the background, have it on autopilot, set it and forget it, make it super easy.
So this is how he made his millions, was with this app where you just round up your purchase, so whatever cents are left over, those cents get invested in Bitcoin. So I think it's a really exciting time to be a young entrepreneur. There are so many options available, it's incredible. So the second issue that I want to talk about is your talent stack. In the past, we used to think about going to the university and getting a job, right? It was very linear, similar to the goals approach. Okay, let's do this step by step. We're going to get a bachelor's and then a master's, and then I'm going to be an accountant and then work for the same company for 20 years or 50 years. We all know that nobody does that. Well, I mean, there might be a few people, but hopefully you don't have to do that, right? It's so much more exciting to be your own boss and work from home and work as you travel around the world and go wherever you want and start your own ideas. So nowadays we're looking more at a, can you scroll up a little bit? Now we're looking more at a talent stack. So the talent stack is looking at all the different things that you do that you're able to do, and this increases your odds of success with your systems approach. So like me, for example, my talent stack. So I'm, basically started as an academician and a professor and a researcher and a guide and mentor for PhD students and an author and, teacher trainer. But I speak several languages and I'm a editor. And then I have all these other interests that are totally different in the health, wellness, beauty sector, and in terms of like I'm a yoga teacher and just all kinds of different stuff. And so apparently that would seem like they're completely unrelated. And so what do? You're a jack of trade of all, but a master of none. Actually, that's not true anymore. I mean, I incorporate yoga into some of my teacher training that I do, so it's really amazing how you can mix and meld all of your talent stack and apply it to make you a very, very unique individual. So you might not be an excellent artist or an excellent comedian or an excellent actor or an excellent writer, but if you're fair at all of these skills and you put them together, you might be a fantastic star. So we want to work with not thinking about a linear approach in terms of our talent stack and having a wide variety of options that we can offer. Keep going. So thinking about this in terms of the variety that you can offer is really important. Nevertheless, as an educator, I do sincerely see that, for example, in my employees, that those who have formal education, those that have a bachelor's and a master's degree, have a completely different mindset in terms of their logic and their confidence and their ability to write. It's really interesting that people have a much more solidified sense of logic when they have a very good formal education. So I'm not discounting formal education. I do believe that that is still very important. So developing your talent stack is in addition to your formal education. Keep going. All right. So how am I developing my talent stack? To just kind of reflect on this, what am I doing? So currently I'm really involved in the tech side of adding to education. So looking at new options for how we can make those 4 systems that I talked about, how can we make those more dynamic, more cutting edge, more up to date? And so we're looking at AR, VR, IR, mixed reality, how we can use different web-based and app-based applications to make education available. I work a lot with underdeveloped areas, so we provide education in a lot of locations in Nepal, for example, in Ivory Coast, and we're looking at options where students don't need good internet access, where they're able to work on a university degree from a mobile device in low bandwidth areas. So we're looking at solutions for these different kinds of problems that we see in our scenario. So to summarize, you know, your success is based on having a good system in place and developing your talent stack and applying it to your unique situation and seeing and always being open to the different options and how you can navigate that path without being concerned. I mean, obtaining objectives is certainly important, but if you have the system in place, you increase your odds of success much more than if you use a linear approach. Go ahead. So I'll make this available to everybody because unfortunately you obviously can't scan the QR codes from there, but if you do, you can scan the QR code and go to the presentation and then go down just a little bit so you can see my email. There you go. So my info is, one of my emails, info@julieciancio.com. If you are interested in any of the ideas that I had to talk about, or if you want advice on your education, on even your entrepreneurship, on your ideas, if you'd like to discuss this, please feel free to contact me. We do work with scholarships, with lots of international scholarships, and helping students to get the right education for them. As I mentioned with the nonprofit that we have, that's what we do, is we provide educational scholarships for students to be able to study in the US. So for disadvantaged youth who don't have the opportunity for higher education, so we're trying to provide that for people who wouldn't have that opportunity otherwise. So do we have any questions?
Yes.
Yeah.
In terms of you providing, louder. Okay. If in terms of you providing scholarships, I mean, with your partner agency, for people to come and study in the US, I've got a few, you know, like little nephews and nieces who are actually on a mid-year, I mean, on a gap year thingy. I don't know what you call it in other countries. Yeah. So they're not in school, but they're working and stuff. What are the requirements that come with being part of or partnering up with you guys? Because I know it's very difficult if you don't have a certain level of marks, and I feel, and I'm from the view that sometimes the best people or the best entrepreneurs, for instance, don't need to have like A grades all the time. Some people are not skilled in that way. So is it something that you guys look at, and what else do you also look at?
Yeah, that's a very nice question. And I actually get that a question a lot. I travel about 80% of my time around the world and working in international education. And frequently I run into parents who have a very, very traditional mindset where they want their kid to go to a top 10 university in the US. Well, usually the kid is not qualified, they don't have good enough grades, and the parents don't have enough money anyway, you know, so they've got this brilliant dream for their child, but unfortunately it's just not attainable at all. And we're actually kind of the opposite mindset, and we're trying to provide education for those people who are not the less than 1% of the world who have that ability. So I totally agree with you that life happens. Sometimes people get poor grades because there was an illness in the family and they had to take care of their mother, or they had to leave school, or you know, things happen, or you change your goals and your dreams in life. And another thing is that frequently when universities are looking for applicants, they have issue with gap year, and they think, oh, what have you been doing for the last year? In our vision, that's completely a legitimate thing to do. It's a really good thing because, in fact, you're gaining experience and maturity along the way. So usually those people who have had a gap, maybe even of 5 years or so, in the US, fortunately, we're prohibited for discrimination. We can't discriminate based on age or even a gap year. So if people are qualified, we'll certainly look at their options. And one of the things that we do is that we interview students individually and talk to them, and we get a wonderful idea of whether they're legitimate or not. Because we do kind of run into the issue of people trying to get a visa to go to the US to study, but that's not their intention. So if we talk to them, we get a good idea of what their true intentions are. Anybody else?
All right. Please wait a while, Ms. Right.
Me or okay. Probably, Julie, our participants are wondering. I know when I heard it, I'm curious. So, the scholarships you provide, will I, or someone like me, be eligible to? Or obviously, I have to qualify, apply for that scholarship to attend your accredited university, either in my country, like Nepal or Bangladesh or wherever you have in the world, or does it have to be in the U.S.? I'm sure everybody wants to go to the U.S., but you know what? U.S. is not only the beautiful place in the world.
Absolutely. Thank you for asking that question. I think I didn't make that clear. So with our joint venture model, we're offering our degrees in other locations. So for example, we do have 2 campuses in Nepal, and we have one in Cairo, and we have one in Dubai, and we have one in Saudi Arabia. And I'm in the process right now of establishing others around the world. So this provides a wonderful option for students, similar to the option that Hui was talking about yesterday in Vietnam, where students can get their US diploma in their home country. So they don't have the cost of going abroad, they don't have the living expenses, they don't need to leave their current employment if they're employed, and we offer it at a subsidized rate. So it's at a locally appropriate market rate for the local area. So they're getting the same quality education as they would get from the US, because we're providing the intellectual property in partnership with a local partner who has the capacity to contextualize it and make it relevant for students in that location. So the case studies are modified to be appropriate for that location. Well, we always say, okay, well, fine and good, that's wonderful in the US, but how do we apply that in our situation here in Nepal, for example? So yes, of course, we can offer, it's already subsidized. In that situation, we don't usually do scholarships, but we can. And, but the price is much more appropriate, and you can do it from the convenience of being in your home country. And this is a model that's really expanding. There are free education sectors around the world. There's one in Seoul, South Korea. There's one in Dubai, right? So there's this education hub where lots of international universities will have campuses set up where students can study there locally without having to go to the US. Is there one more? Yeah.
Hi. I was gonna pick up on the part where we were skill stacking, and I'm pro skill stacker, so I do stack skills, and I want it. It's helping me.
Yeah.
But at the back of my mind, I sometimes think that what if, in 5 years I've stacked say 2-3 new skills, the skill that I acquired and not currently using, that will eventually fade away. If you would comment on that part aspect, and the second would be, if it is fading away and if I'm actively acquiring new skills, if I think in terms of ROI of my invested time for that, and maybe it doesn't help me in the future, would you ever use that kind of calculation to think what will be the return on it after I invest that time, and what if I don't use it? So would it be a loss, active loss for me?
Right.
Do you ever think in those lines?
That's an excellent question. I really like that. Yes, it's definitely important, right? Our time is our one limited commodity. You're never going to get it back. So it's absolutely essential that you're judicious about selecting where you're going to spend your time, because your time is your most valuable asset. Obviously, there's money involved as well if you're going to pay for a course or do some kind of training or something like that, or need to travel to be somewhere to acquire another skill. So there's the financial as well as the time considerations in your ROI calculation. I'm of the mindset that nothing learned is wasted. It can certainly be applied somehow. Thank you. I think that it's, you never know. That it's difficult to make this calculation because you can never predict the future, of course. So you don't know that you're not going to use it, and you don't know that technology is going to change and it's going to become obsolete, for example. So it is difficult to predict. But maybe there's something tangential that you learned from that skill. So you're not applying specifically that thing that you studied, but you learned critical and creative thinking, or you learned, some concept that you can adapt and apply to a new situation. So I think you need to be careful. I mean, as dynamic, young, interested people in a modern situation where things are growing and changing so rapidly, there's so many options available to us. So we need to be careful. You need to kind of know yourself. Are you that kind of person that starts a million things and never finishes? Or do you, get stuff done and then you can move on to the next? So you kind of need to know yourself. I think that that's important too. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, last question. Okay, 2 more.
So the model that you provided seems to be very interesting, that you use subsidized education in other countries and also send people to check the institution in other countries whether they have a good quality education or something. But the thing is that where is the profit out of it for you? Like as an institution, why are you doing this thing? Or is it just a social service stuff, or is it something that you benefit from, and how are you benefiting from it?
Very good question. I also didn't make that clear. Thank you. So with the licensing model, we charge a royalty. It's actually quite lucrative because there's very little labor involved. We need to validate their curriculum. We study it and make sure that it's good, and we do a site visit to check out the situation and how they're applying their knowledge there. But after that's done, it kind of rolls on its own, and it's pretty lucrative and very labor unintensive. With the other models, we still do make a very good profit. It's quite profitable, actually. So even though we're providing subsidized education, and even in the US, our education is subsidized. It's very, very inexpensive in comparison to other universities. So there's market for everybody, right? We're not Harvard, and we're not appealing to people who want to pay $95,000 a year for an education, right? Our education is about $11,000 a year in the US, which is very inexpensive for US standards. It's about 1/3 of the average cost. Nevertheless, it still is quite profitable for us. So yeah, it's a good economic model as well as an educational model.
Last questions.
Hi, I'm Sanjida from Bangladesh. You were talking about like there's no problem if someone has study gap. And you also told that you are looking for some qualifications that can overflow the study gap of a student. So what kind of qualifications are you guys are looking for in a student?
Excellent question. One thing that we look for is like, what do you do that makes you special, that's going to bring your talent stack to our institution? How are you going to make it a more dynamic, interesting place? So we want to know about all of your life activities. What have you been doing during this gap year? Have you been an entrepreneur? Did you have a startup? Do you have a social enterprise? Do you have a nonprofit? Or do you just volunteer your time? Are you a singer, a dancer, a gymnast? You know, all of these qualities are so much more robust than your grade point average. I mean, that's important, but it's not the only thing. So that's what we look for. Yeah. Do you have time for one more, or can we?
Yes. Okay, that's.
Sorry. Last one.
Thank you so much, Professor Julie. Actually, I'm in the mindset that today you mustn't go to US to study.
I agree.
Neither do you need to go to any formal university. I think this is an entrepreneur bootcamp, and as an entrepreneur, you should have that quest to study and get questions and solutions for yourself. So in that line, I'm asking this question. You said you provide content, ready content that people can use in their locality. A situation where I want to start an online educative startup, like people could study online, powered by AI, self-study model. Can you provide content for me?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So this would be one of the situations where we would certainly need to work together. What kind of content do you want? Who's your public? You know, and see what we can do to work together. Absolutely, that would be very interesting. Okay, thank you very